welcome to another episode of SCFGI, Science Club for Girls Live. I'm Hannah with Science Club for Girls, and that was Mr. Music with your theme song. Very nice. Mr. Music, we'll need you for one of the experiments later, so don't go too far. Glad he's here to help today. Well, you know who's not here to help today, unfortunately, is Dr. Marbles. Unfortunately, Dr. Marbles had to take Louie to the dog park, so he sent this really adorable photo instead, and he's like, we'll see you next week. And I was like, Dr. Marbles, science is more important than Louie sometimes, but I guess that just didn't work because he loves Louie. Anyway, let's talk about last week. Last week, we talked about something really important, and that was smell. Smell is one of our 5 senses. Remember, the other 5 senses are sight, touch, taste, hearing, and smell. Those are the 5 senses. We learned that our brain is really, really important in distinguishing different smells. In fact, what happens is when you take a deep breath in, there's certain molecules that are released from objects that end up going into your nose, and then the olfactory neurons that are inside of your nose look out for those certain molecules and send messages to your brain to let your brain know you're smelling pizza or you're smelling garbage. Blech. We also learned how important smell is in being able to distinguish 2 different things that we're eating. A lot of times things like lemons and limes taste really similar because they activate similar taste buds on our tongue. We need that sense of smell in order to tell us if it's a lemon or if it's a lime. Those olfactory neurons are really, really important in distinguishing smell. All right, now today we're kind of switching gears a little bit because we're going to talk about something called probability. And for this, we're going to need to use some math. A lot of times, people forget that math is a really important component of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In fact, a lot of areas of science use math in order to figure things out. So today we're going to focus on math, which I'm really excited about. All right, now probability can be kind of confusing. So let's start with something simple. What's 1 plus 1? Scream it at your TV or write it down in your science notebook. I hope everyone knows this. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 1 is 2. We know that. Thank you, Mr. Music, for those 2 notes. All right, ready for a little bit more of a challenging question? What's 1 times 10? This one's tricky. Well, this is saying I have one group of 10 things. So how many things do I have? Well, if I have only one group of 10, that must be 10. 1 times 10 is 10. Okay, so we know that it's always going to be 2 when you add 1 and 1 together. And we know that it's always going to be 10 when you multiply 1 and 10. But there are other things in math and science that we don't know, or we're unsure of, or are unpredictable. And these things are actually really interesting because we can't know what's going to happen. Here's a great example of that. Have you ever turned on the news and seen a weather report that looks something like this and heard the weather reporter say, there's a 20% chance of rain tomorrow? Well, that weather reporter is using something called probability. They're telling you the likelihood or the chances that it's going to rain tomorrow. We never know what's going to happen with the weather for sure. It's extremely unpredictable. And so we can instead make a prediction and use probability to say what's likely to happen. That's what probability is. Probability is a measurement of how likely something is going to happen. Probability is measured on a scale like this. You can have 0, which means if something has a 0% probability, it means it's not likely to happen. Here's a great example. There's a 0% chance I'm going to turn into a dog right now. It's really unlikely. And on the other end of the spectrum is 100%. That's really likely. It's probably going to happen, most likely going to happen, and sometimes definitely going to happen. There's 100% chance that, what's a good one? Oh, that tomorrow is Saturday. It's 100% chance tomorrow is Saturday. It's definitely going to be Saturday tomorrow. And then right in the middle of that line is 50% chance. There's a 50% chance I'll have a snack after this show. I might not. It's kind of in the middle. So when it goes back to weather, let's say the weather reporter says there's a 0% chance of rain. Do you think it's going to rain tomorrow? No, it's really unlikely. The probability is really low. But if they say there's a 100% chance of rain tomorrow, do you think it's going to rain? Yeah, most likely it's going to rain. It's probably pretty likely. All right. Now, the best way to kind of practice this and show this is with a coin toss. A coin toss is extremely unpredictable. We don't know if we're going to land on heads or tails. A lot of times I'll actually use a coin toss to make a decision about something because I want it to be kind of random and for something else to make a decision for me. All right, so let's go ahead and do something. Now, in order to figure out the probability that, let's say I'm going to land on heads, you need a formula. A formula is kind of a thing to help figure out a math problem. So probability formula is the number of possibilities over the number of outcomes. What this means is the number of possible ways I could get a heads. Well, let's think. Okay, well, there's only one head side on a coin. So that must mean there's only one way I could get heads, and that's by landing on this side. So the number of possibilities I'm going to write is 1. All right, now on the bottom of our fraction goes the number of outcomes. This means, what could I possibly get if I flipped a coin? How many different options are there for things that I could land on? Well, I could land on heads. That's one option. I could land on tails. That's another option. So there's 2 possible outcomes. Cool. So again, if we take a look at this, our formula for probability of landing on a heads is 1/2. Or this is the same as 50%. Don't worry about the math on that. We'll talk about it in a later episode. So there's a 50% chance that I'll get a heads, and that makes sense. A lot of times people will say 50-50. It's either this or that. It's either heads or tails. All right, let's try it out and see how many times I actually land on heads. Now, because Dr. Marbles isn't here to make a prediction chicken with us today, we got Mr. Music, which I guess is still good. Anyway, Mr. Music, if you think I'm going to land on heads, I want you to play a high note as the coin's up in the air. Something like, yeah, maybe a little shorter. That's perfect. Okay. And if you think it's going to land on tails, play a low note. Perfect. Here we go. What do you think? Let's see if he's right. It was tails. Sorry, Mr. Music. That was a high note. You thought heads. Bummer. All right. Now on our sheet, I'm going to record down that number 1 was heads. Or did I say tails? Tails. Sorry about that. Tails. All right. Let's do it 6 more times. It's going to need to go pretty fast, Mr. Music. Here we go. Ready? And go. You think tails? It's heads. Mr. Music, you're not very good at this. All right, next one. You think it's going to be tails, and it's tails. Nice job, Mr. Music. You're getting better. Here we go. You think tails, and it's heads. It's really unpredictable, huh? All right, let's try 2 more times. Here we go. You think heads, and it's going to be tails. Sorry, Mr. Music. All right, last one. You think tails, it's heads. Ugh, better luck next time, Mr. Music. All right, let's take a look at our chart. How many times did we get heads on our coin toss? 1, 2, 3. How many times did we get tails on our coin toss? 1, 2, 3. So we got 3 heads and 3 tails. We had a 50-50% chance of getting heads. So our probability prediction was pretty good. There was a 50% chance of getting heads on a coin toss. Very nice. All right, now let's take a look at something a little bit more confusing. And that is dice. You see, dice are definitely more confusing because instead of just 2 options, we have 6 options now. So let's take a look. Okay, now with the die, I want to predict how likely or what is the probability that I will get a 4 when I roll the dice. Well, let's see. Let's plug it into our formula again. Okay, remember the formula for probability is number of possibilities over number of outcomes. Okay, so what are the possibilities or the possible ways I could roll a 4? Well, there's only one 4 on this die, so I guess I could only land on that. That's my only possibility of getting a 4. So I'm going to write 1 for number of possibilities. All right, what about number of outcomes? What are the possible things I could land on when I roll a die? Well, I could land on a 1, I could land on a 2, I could land on a 3, I could land on a 4, a 5, or a 6. So that's 6 possibilities. All right, so the chances of me rolling a 4 on my die are 1/6. That's a pretty low probability of rolling a 4. All right, let's test it out and see what happens. I made another table, and this time I'm going to record the number that I roll when I roll my die. All right, here we go. It was a 4. Pretty good on the first try. Number 2, a 1. All right, roll number 3, a 6. Roll number 4, a 2. Roll number 5, a 2 again. And roll number 6, a 4. So it looks like out of my 6 rolls, I got a 4 twice. So although my prediction was 1/6, I actually rolled a 4 2 out of the 6 times. Well, wait, why is that? Because that doesn't seem like that's not what I came up with. Well, this is actually really important because it's important to know that probability is kind of like a prediction. Even though we can say that there was a 1/6 chance of getting a 4 when I rolled the die, we can't be sure. Probability is just like a prediction, like when we make a prediction chicken, right? We just kind of predict what's going to happen, but that's not always what happens. So we need to use probability like a guide. We know that we're going to roll a 4 somewhere like 1 out of 6 chances, but we can't know that for sure. So it's really important to use probability like a guide to guide you in a certain direction. Now, probability is really important in a lot of different careers. People use probability to figure out how likely it is that a certain team will win a basketball game, or how likely it is that a vaccine will work, or how likely it is that we'll experience a hurricane this season, or how likely it is that a certain candidate will win the presidential election. It's really important to learn more about probability. And my friend Tanya got to sit down with her friend Gianna and learn a little bit more about how she uses probability in her everyday life as a potential med student. So let's go ahead and take a look at their conversation.
Hi, Gianna. Thanks so much for joining us. Could you please introduce yourself?
Of course. I'm Gianna Baker. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Connecticut. I earned my degree in physiology and neurology with a minor in mathematics. I'm currently applying to medical school because I plan on being a physician.
Awesome. And so could you please tell us how you got interested in math?
I first became interested in math in around elementary school when in class they would give us the different math sheets we would do where you'd have to add everything up in like a minute and you could do as fast as possible, or like the multiplication ones, and those, I always loved doing those. So those were my favorite part of class. And then I went on to be in the advanced math classes all throughout middle school and then high school. And then when I got to college, I didn't want to let go of math. I wanted to keep taking math courses. I wanted to have a minor in it because while it may not be as related to my career as it would if I was like a business major or actuary, I really enjoyed math classes. So I wanted to keep taking them.
That's awesome. And so why do you think that math and probability are important as somebody who wants to be a doctor?
I think math and probability are really important because as a doctor, you need to understand like how likely things are to happen. How likely is your patient going to develop certain conditions or symptoms? How likely will it be that their treatment works or it helps them? Or how likely are different side effects? Or even like think about vaccines. How likely is the vaccine going to work? So those type of things. It helps give doctors perspective.
Was there anybody who really inspired you to really follow your passions?
Of course, my high school AP calculus teacher, she really inspired me. I took AP Calc when I was a junior in high school. So then my senior year, I actually became a TA for her class. And that was because the teacher and I connected very well. I did very well in her course. And I loved talking to her about calculus and even like about life stuff. She really became a mentor for me. So when I worked as a TA for her, it was a great experience because then it reinforced everything I knew about calculus. It went from being able to learn it to being able to explain it to someone else and break it down and express what I'm thinking as clearly as possible.
What helps you when you're struggling with a math problem? Like, how do you make sure that you see it all the way through?
When I'm struggling with a math problem, I try to consider everything that was given in the problem. I take all the different elements and I write them down. Like I know x equals this, y equals this, or write down everything that was given. So I know where my starting point is. And then I start working from there. I'm like, okay, what equations do I know? What can I do with this? How can I relate different things? And then like, you have to take it step by step where you don't know what you're going to need to do at the end necessarily every time, but you should be able to know how to get from this step to that step and just keep going like that all the way through the problem.
That's super helpful. And what advice do you have for the audience?
I would really recommend that like all students really explore their passions, reach out and see what you might be interested in because there are tons of different topics, tons of different careers that you could go into. And you don't really know if you like something, if you want to do it until you try it. So I recommend taking all the elective courses you can, reaching out, exploring all your possible interests because that could be your career one day, or it could be your hobby or just something that you enjoy doing. So that's what I recommend.
So, last question. Do you know what kind of doctor you'd like to be in the future?
I'm not sure what type of doctor I want to be. I'm the type of person where I think all the fields are super interesting. I could see myself going into any of them really. Every time I shadow physicians, I'm like, wow, this is awesome. I could see myself doing this. This is so interesting. I love learning about all the different fields. So I'm not sure yet. I think I could go into sports medicine, orthopedics, endocrinology, any of those, or even ones that I haven't experienced quite yet.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much for joining us, Gianna. Bye bye.
Thanks for having me.
That was really cool. I loved hearing about Gianna's experience with math when she was in school and how her AP calculus teacher really inspired her. I also loved hearing how Gianna tackles really difficult math problems by taking them step by step and not getting overwhelmed. It reminds me a lot of our brain lesson when we talked about building those new neural pathways and making our brain stronger by struggling. Really, really cool. I also loved all the ways that she was talking about how probability being used in medicine, how it's really important to consider the probability of a treatment working or the likelihood that a certain patient will get a treatment because it's a really important guide for doctors to use in treating a patient. So all really important stuff, and I'm sure Gianna will make a fantastic doctor one day. Thank you so much, Tanya, for sitting down and talking to Gianna about her interests and her experience. I hope that you challenge yourself at home with some of these probability problems. Actually, I have a really cool challenge for you at home, which is you have two die, maybe from an old game set or something like that. See what is the probability of getting a matching pair. The best way to test this is to create a table similar to one we did and see how many times you roll a match. Then if you can figure out the math behind it, even better. All right. Well, it's been a fantastic episode. I'm so glad that you could join us. Mr. Music is running over to help us end with our beautiful jingle. And we'll see you next time on another episode of SCF July.